Hello everybody, this is JT Bear coming to you from my tiny little kitchen. Today I'm going to show you my favorite old recipe for banana bread. Alright, if you're interested, check it out. I'll put a link down below with the recipe, and I strongly recommend trying it. It's easy enough, even I can make it, so how hard could it be? Let's get cooking. Alright, so for today's banana bread recipe, we're going to be going back in time a little bit to a 1990 edition of the Better Homes and Gardens new cookbook. I have had this one since 1990, and I refer to it on a frighteningly regular basis. Now, as you all know, I don't necessarily stick directly to the recipes, but I'm going to try really hard in this case because this banana bread, as is pretty darn good. Let's get started. Alright, so getting started, we're going to grab a large mixing bowl, and we're going to add 1 cup of the flour, not the full 1 3/4 cups, just 1 cup of flour. Then we're going to add the sugar, the baking powder, the soda, and the salt. We're going to mix this all together. So that's half a cup. That's 1 cup of flour. That's 1/3. And 2/3 of a cup of sugar. Next we're going to add 2 teaspoons of baking powder. That's 1. And that's 2. Apparently we need to get more baking powder. 1/2 a teaspoon of baking soda. And 1/4 teaspoon of table salt. Now I'm just going to quickly stir this up to combine it. It says to use an electric mixer, but I mix just about everything with a fork. Just one of those peculiarities, I guess. Alright, now I'm going to put that aside for a second. Now, the recipe calls for approximately 1 cup of mashed banana, and it says that's about 3 bananas worth. So I'll just break this up and get to mashing that. And then, like everything else, I'm just going to use a fork for this. It's pretty simple with a fork, just give it a press against the side, and a good overripe banana should mash up pretty easy. That's how much I got out of those 3 bananas. The recipe calls for 1 cup, so we'll just see how that works out. So there's my 1 cup, and I've got just about enough left over for a peanut butter and mashed banana sandwich later. We'll put that to the side. Okay, so now that we've got our bananas all mashed up and ready to go, it's time to start adding ingredients back to our original dry mix. So I'll just pour, I guess, that mashed banana into here. Next we're going to add the margarine. I would prefer to do this with real butter, but it's a rough economy, isn't it? Now this recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of milk. So carefully 1 and 2. Now again, it does say to use an electric mixer on low, but I'm just going to mix this up with the fork until I'm pretty content that it's all blended together. Now that we've got it all mixed together, more or less, we can add the last few ingredients that we've got here. And those last ingredients are 3/4 of a cup of flour. So 1, 2, and 3, and 2 eggs. 1 and 2. Now that we've got the last of those ingredients in here, I'm just going to mix it all up again. And then after this is mixed, we can start putting in our optional ingredients. When I make my banana bread, I like to add both chocolate chips and walnuts to it. No such thing as overboard when it comes to home-baked breads, in my opinion. Alright, let's get those nuts and chocolate chips. Now the recipe calls for 1/4 cup of nuts. Like I said, it is optional. I'm just going to break those up a little bit more. Got to do this the old-fashioned way because we don't have a nut breaker. Got a nut cracker, but what a pain that would be. And I'm also going to put in 1/4 cup of chocolate chips. So there we go. Then we'll give this one last mix through. Kind of folding those nuts and chocolate chips into everything, making sure they're evenly distributed. Looking pretty good. So next, I'm going to take my silicone loaf pan here. As flimsy as it seems, this thing works really well. I'm very impressed with it. And it says you're supposed to pour it into a pre-greased loaf pan. I found silicone on its own seems to work just fine, though. And then once we get it in here, that's when the good smells start, isn't it? Alright, I'm probably pushing things a little bit here, but I put that whole thing into a single loaf pan. Now what I'm doing here is I'm just taking my spatula and I'm pushing it a little bit towards the middle. So hopefully as it rises, I'll get a nice dome in the center as compared to lips around the edges. That looks nice. So with the oven preheated to 350 degrees, I'm just going to throw this in there. That needs to cook for about 55 to 60 minutes or until a toothpick comes out of the center clean. We'll check back on it then. Alright, at this point it's been in there for 54 minutes. Let's take a look. Oh, my oven's filthy. Oh, that looks pretty good though. Time to grab a toothpick. For those of you who don't know how this works, the toothpick test is really simple. You basically just stick it into the middle of whatever you're cooking and check to see if it comes out clean. Focus would help. From the looks of this toothpick, it's not quite ready yet. I'm going to check this again in about 5 minutes. Back in the oven for you. So here we are 5 minutes later. That does seem to be a bit more golden brown, doesn't it? I'm going to go ahead and say that banana bread is done. Alright, so now to put that onto the wire rack and let it cool. Alright, so one thing I always appreciate about silicone is just how easy it is to get things out of this most of the time. Quick pull. And it's out. Now, the hardest part of this whole thing, letting that cool for a good 10 minutes before I cut into it and find out how it tastes. Lucky for you, I'm just going to skip the camera right to that point, but I have to wait. Alright, now that this has had some time to cool, let's cut into it and take a look. I love that first cut into a fresh loaf. Looks pretty good to me. Quite delicious. It's a little bit crumbly. Probably could have used maybe 20 minutes to sit. I guess there's really only one more thing to do at this point. Well, I guess the last thing left for me to do with this here banana bread is to try it. So with that in mind, I will bid you a fond farewell. Thanks for watching. Go make some banana loaf.